few weeks have been a geopolitical roller coaster, with each day bringing new surprises and shifts in policy. Influence operations are being used to shape public opinion and push governments to form new alliances. Good evening, my name is Maia Mazurkiewicz and welcome to the Anatomy of Disinformation. India is the world's most populous country, but only 40% of Indian youth attend secondary school. This BRICS member is an important ally to have in your corner, and a large target for disinformation campaigns. So it's no surprise that Elon Musk met recently with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Russia is looking to forge alliances all over the world. One of the biggest partners is India, which has increased Russian crude oil imports from 1% to 40% since the start of the war in Ukraine. What are the attitudes of Indians towards Russia and Ukraine, and have they been affected by disinformation? We'll talk about that with our guest.
Adrianna Śniadowska, CEO of the Center for International Relations and THINKTANK. She's a security analyst by profession and a graduate of Université de Bordeaux 4. She engages in research projects that monitor disinformation campaigns, analyzing their impact on security and political stability. Ms. Śniadowska coordinates international projects related to combating fake news in India and the Western Balkans.
Ada, thank you so much for joining us today. Today we're talking about India, and I have a question. Why we, Western Europeans and basically people from the Western world, need to think about India?
That's a very good question. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really glad to be here. I watch your program and it's a very valuable one. So we have to really get more interested into India for various reasons that I'm going to list really quickly. First of all, we have to look at this very pragmatic economic aspect. India is to become, in 3, maybe even 2 years, the third economic power in the world. Isn't it enough to get interested in the country? I think it's very, very important. EU is the most important Indian trade economic partner. So we already have an open market, and we have seen that, we have noticed that European Union starts to get even more interested in India. We saw it with the recent visit of Ursula von der Leyen to India, with almost all commissioners who came with her, and she also announced to sign a free trade agreement with India. So Poland is at the very good moment to strengthen these relations. And to be completely honest with you, we have a very good position in India. We are perceived as a regional power, and we have a very good connotations, okay? We don't have this colonial past as a country, which is very important in the context of India. So I think that it's very important to get more and more interested into the country.
Very good. I'm particularly interested in the influence operations and disinformation.
Very good.
If India is becoming such a strategic country these days, how the influence operations are being seen in there? You're doing research on the issue as well, especially on the Ukraine, right?
That's correct. We have been doing many researches with our Indian partners, with our Indian counterparts, and that's a very good question again. Thank you for that, because that's an issue in India, biased information, because speaking about disinformation, that's a very strong word, because most of the information that are biased in the Indian media are not voluntary. Why is that? So Indian media, for a big part of it, are following the official statements of the government, the official position of the government, which is the strategic non-alignment, or maybe I would call it strategic multi-alignment, which means that Indian government is trying to have very good relations with Russia for various reasons.
Buying their crude oil, for example.
For example, very good example, but there's another one, their armament, their space program, they're dependent on Russia on that. But also for them, this is very important in the context of counterbalance to Russian, Chinese, Pakistani axis that they are afraid of, that could be created if they don't really, take care of the Indian-Russian relations. So that's the very first thing. And that's the official statement of the government, to really be friendly with Russia and to not openly criticize what Russia has been doing from the very beginning. But there is one thing that is absolutely sure, that Russia is the aggressor in this war and that Ukraine has been attacked.
Is it sure in India as well?
Unfortunately not.
Because what we're seeing as well, that there is quite a lot of Nepalese people, but also right now Indian,
yes,
going to the Russian army, right? Are there influence operations from Russia to get the people to fight for them, or?
Of course, and human trafficking networks as well, that some of them were dismantled. But it's a very sad story, because those people, what do they follow? They follow better living conditions, and there were even stories covered by the.
So they're being
media.
Paid by the Russian
army? They are being paid relatively good money, good wages for their economic conditions, and so they attempted to join the army. And some of them, I really read many stories of this kind. They wanted to go to Russia to work, and they were really put into the army. So some of them are really confused, and there are many, video reportages with Indian families who really are sorry for their kids who had to go to the war. And of course, the numbers in the Indian media are completely different from the numbers that we could find elsewhere. Some official numbers by the Indian media were that only 100 soldiers were put into the Russian army. We do know that there were more people, especially mercenaries and those people from the trafficking.
And it's not being informed in the media. And you're making your research on traditional media or also social media?
We do make our research on traditional media because we notice that this media landscape in India is really diverse, it's really huge. We've been monitoring 500 satellite channels that you can find in India, 80 of them being news channels, only news channels. In India you can find 80,000 newspapers and 100 million copies sold every day. So we are talking about a huge variety.
Huge market.
Yes, very big market, very important market. And, people read newspapers. What is very interesting about the media landscape in India, which is really common to many global South countries, is that international relations are not that important. It hasn't been that important. It's changed in recent years, luckily or not. And some main geopolitical events are covered, such as the situation in Gaza, the conflict in Gaza, and the war in Ukraine. So we had really a lot of work to do where we were monitoring the media. Why, answering your question more precisely, why we were not digging into the social media? Because that's something that is completely out of control in many cases, and social media are very popular in India. And we could basically spend years and years digging into it. The spread of information in the social media is really unprecedented.
Mm-hmm. And what were the main narratives that you saw in your research?
The main one is about NATO. Really, that's the one that we find very often, that NATO is going farther and farther, that it's mentally really into the national zone of influence in Russia, and it really wants to convince Ukraine to go to the Western bloc, which Russia didn't like, and Russia had to defend itself. We find also narratives concerning President Zelensky, that he is a Nazi, that he wants to have a Nazi government.
So very much Russian narratives.
Absolutely a Russian line of narratives, even though, like I said, we do observe a big variety of information in India. We find also those media services that are pretty much in line with our Western narratives. We find a very old and respected INFA, which is Information News Feature Services Agency, and they really cover war in Ukraine from a very precise Western, let's say, oriented perspective, even though I wouldn't call it Western oriented, because there are these are just facts, what they write in their articles.
And exactly, it's a power game, but in diplomacy, as in communication, knowing the other side and listening to each other is a key. Thank you so much for this perspective. Influence operations are really influencing as well different countries, but I think that's important to know what is happening in there.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Let's now see a short report on disinformation.
The narrative about Ukrainian-Polish relations, which are very bad, and we quote Polish portals speaking about the Volyn. Of course, in this case, someone had to inspire the Indian journalists or experts to look at that particular case. And in this case, Indians much rather would follow what they find in Russian media than what they find in Western media. Also because they don't have really trust in everything what Ukrainians or Europeans or Americans tell them because of historical reasons. So in other words, same way like India reacts on Russia is maybe like Poland reacts on America. We are biased. We generally, especially before Trump, we just liked Americans and we thought that's really a very nice country. Same way in India is a perception of Russia, and this can be a very big source of a lot of pieces of narratives which base or which are exactly the same as you find in the Russian media as well. So it's obvious that in the classical media you would find a lot of pieces of information, a lot of articles which present very kind of moderate point of view. No radical criticism against Russia and no radical support for Ukraine. Balanced approach in the interest of India. While in the social media, it's different because, of course, every Indian can have an opinion. But here, again, we would have a very biased society which takes whatever is pro-Russian as a possible truth, not disinformation. So the repetition of many narratives which we here in Europe would consider disinformation, they just repeat because people really think alike and they agree with these statements. India was colonized by the British, meaning European power. India during the Cold War was much closer to the Soviet Union than to the West because of the Pakistan issue. Pakistan was backed by the United States. And India also, thanks to people-to-people relations, has had a long friendship with Soviet Union and then Russia. So Russia is perceived as a friend, as a reliable diplomatic partner, as a very good business partner.
One of the first documented instances of large-scale disinformation on WhatsApp happened in India in 2017. Messages spreading rumors about child abduction and organ harvesting triggered mob violence and killings. How is India handling the problem of disinformation now? And what are some of the prevalent narratives they are dealing with? We'll talk about that and more with our next guest.
Govindraj Ethiraj, founder of IndiaSpend, BOOMLive and The Core. He is a veteran television and print journalist with over 25 years of experience reporting on Indian business, committed to using data journalism to enhance public discourse and accountability. He previously served as founder-editor of Bloomberg TV India and held roles at CNBC TV 18, Business Standard and The Economic Times. A McNulty Prize laureate, a BMW Responsible Leaders Award winner, and a fellow of the Aspen Global Leadership Network.
Govind, welcome and thank you so much for joining us straight from Mumbai. We're talking We're talking during the interesting times when the alliances are changes. Nobody knows what is happening in terms of the geopolitics, and quite a lot of disinformation is also involved in the politics itself. And we are wondering today what is happening in India, as India is a strategic partner and a big alliance. Being the biggest country in the world in terms of the population. So how disinformation is involved in the Indian situation right now, and how it's affecting the society?
Right. So once again, thank you for having me. I think India is as affected by misinformation and disinformation as most other countries, which have a high mobile penetration. So just to put things in context, because the infrastructure is important. India has now more than 800 million smartphones, and this figure must have been about 100, 200 million, let's say 7 or 8 years ago. So the number of smartphones has grown dramatically, and the cost of data is amongst the cheapest in the world. So which means there is a phone in the hand of almost every second Indian or every adult Indian. And that phone has access to the internet, which in turn has access to to platforms like WhatsApp or end-to-end encryption platforms like WhatsApp. So the internet really equals WhatsApp, and that really is the basis on which, or the foundation on which the entire information and misinformation ecosystem is built. So people communicate everything. Oftentimes, it's linked to something political, and that is something that we've seen in India. And a lot of political parties use some form of misinformation or disinformation to achieve a larger, what I would call a political objective of trying to convince you or trying to sway you.
Back in 2017, the Indian WhatsApp case was, I think, among the first one to record in terms of disinformation. And did India do anything in particular to kind of prevent disinformation like this, or to educate people, while you have a situation that the education level in India is still low?
Right. So I think there is a distinction between literacy, if that equals education, and digital literacy. A lot of people who are literate, as people who've, let's say, gone to school or college, like you and me, may not necessarily be digitally literate, which means they believe things that they see on the mobile or forwards. Though I would say that the number may have reduced a little bit now, but in 2017, the period you're referring to, when things were still exploding, it was very likely that people would believe much more of what they saw via a WhatsApp forward or some other social media post than they do today. And I think the case that you're talking about in 2017 was to do with rumors about children being kidnapped. And this spread like wildfire across villages and remote parts of India. And it's so much so that, villagers used to pounce on people who were visiting their villages and start attacking them because they saw rumors saying that there are child kidnappers on the loose. So this was a big thing. And it was not disinformation. I mean, this was more misinformation, that people, saw something, there were fears, they already were scared about something, and they put two and two together and came to obviously the wrong conclusion. I think since then, the nature of disinformation and misinformation has changed. A lot of it is to do, it could be to do with, for example, in the last year or so, more deep fakes. It could be to do with synthetic audio, which we saw some amount of during the big elections we had in April and May last year.
Any specific cases that it was used in? Any specific narratives that people believed more in?
So I think it keeps changing. So the way misinformation works is actually the bad actors, as I would call them, they wait for something to happen and then they jump into it. So let me give you some of the big examples which are actually global. So if you look at the October 7th attack by Hamas, the terrorist attack on Israel year before last, one of the big misinformation, let's say, threads that we saw was in India about people who, essentially, there was a lot more misinformation about what was happening and who triggered the attack, how Israel responded, and so on, than was true. And the thing is, a lot of that misinformation was actually being generated in India, which was very unusual. And there are studies which have shown that.
In India, you said that during the 7 years there was quadruple amount of mobile phones in the hands of the citizens. And are there any particular education schemes or campaigns that people can be aware that actually disinformation is an issue, or there's no even awareness about that?
So there are a lot of campaigns. Actually, many of those campaigns started more recently in the context of scams. So that's the latest challenge that we face. I mean, I'm sure countries all over the world are facing, because there are digital scamsters who try to con you of your savings, or they make you make you transfer your money, or they tempt you by saying that you invest here and we'll double that money, or crypto. So we are seeing a lot of that. And
what are the problems? Because it seems that India doesn't have problems about disinformation.
No. All I'm saying is that the problems are there. I think your question was, is the government doing anything, or
the government, or in general, right? Also the civil society.
Yeah, so I think people are doing things, but I mean, if you ask me the question about is the problem solved because of this, the answer is absolutely no, because the problem is too large. I mean, we are talking about, like I said, hundreds of millions of people seeing stuff which maybe is not true, and the campaigns and all the education efforts only reaching maybe a few millions or tens of millions. So the gap is huge, as it is everywhere else in the world. So this problem is not solved and is not going to be solved in a while. All I'm saying.
And you're having almost 2 billion citizens, and I have the last question, maybe from what we actually started. So right now there is a fight for the alliances. Do you see the influence operations coming from China, Russia, or US, or do you see that there are kind of also perhaps the newest meeting of the Indian Prime Minister with Elon Musk? Do you think there is any kind of triggers in terms of the economy? And that you can see that also the citizen population is being triggered by somehow misinformation, disinformation campaigns?
So let me go sequentially. I think your first question is there any international misinformation operation in India? To our understanding, no. I think we may not have data to back this up, but our intuitive understanding is there's not much of it. There have been stray instances of some international misinformation operations, mostly by neighboring countries, but it's been very small and occasional, and it's definitely not large enough. So most of our problems are actually domestic and within the country. I think the second part of your question was to do with Elon Musk. India wants Elon Musk to come and invest in setting up a gigafactory to manufacture cars and batteries. And that's an ongoing project. Tesla is going to come into India as an imported product in a few months' time. But India wants Musk to come and set up a full manufacturing operation like he has in Berlin, in Germany, and in China. So I don't think there is any other interaction with Musk except for this, and maybe. So
the Prime Minister met with Musk as the business person, or he met with Musk as the representative of the US government?
As far as I know, he met him as a business person, but I wouldn't know one way or the other in any case. I mean, only people who are in that room would know better. But to my understanding, going by previous meetings and India's outreach to Elon Musk and Tesla, the interest has been, or India's desire has been, to bring Musk to invest in electric car manufacturing facilities in India, because we want more electric car or electric vehicle manufacturing companies to come into India and obviously help in mitigating climate change.
Govind, thank you so much for showing us the perspective from India, and good luck at your work.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Let's now see how tailored content is used in disinformation campaigns.
Actors create influence materials specifically designed to resonate with a target audience's beliefs, values, or fears. By aligning with the audience's views, disinformation actors build trust and gain insider status within the community. Over time, this strategy allows them to grow an online following and establish credibility, making future manipulation efforts more effective.
As the global order shifts, world powers look for new alliances. India is a strategic partner with the biggest population in the world. That makes it a vast target for influence operations. We are seeing the impact of disinformation unfold before our very eyes. It's not just being spread by fake accounts on social media. The world's superpowers are involved as well. It's a war on our hearts and minds. So till next time, keep calm and think deeply.